Alright, welcome back to part 2 of this little series I'm doing here. For today we are going to be discussing the Russian tanks of World War II. I wanted to do this with the American tanks, but I haven't bought the DLC pack, so I don't have access to any of the American stuff, which honestly there's more American stuff in here than there is in War Thunder, but at least for today it's going to be a little bit of a better quality video. Now obviously starting out with the BT-5 here, this was the first tank they started with, the BT-5s and the BT-7s, which honestly, there is a really cool BT-5 called the RBT-5, which basically, it had these like big rockets they'd attached to the side of the turret. You guys have probably, seen it if you've played War Thunder, maybe. BT-7, there really is not much of noticeable thing for this, other than there was a Finnish BT-7, or I think they took off the BT-5 actually. I don't know, it was one of the two. I think it was a BT-5. So the Finnish took the BT-5, like armor hull, gave it an American transmission, gave it a Finnish turret, a British gun, and shot it with German rounds. So the BT-42 is quite an interesting thing. But yeah, these are the two light tanks of notes. Well, obviously you have the T-60s and T-70s and T-80s, but I don't know, these were the more effective ones. Kind of started everything. Now going to the medium tanks, this is a model 1940 T-34, the L11 gun. So as you can see, this one was a very different looking model from what I think people are most used to. And I mean, of course there was the prototype, but this is an interesting tank. This was the first one. These did kind of have their issues going off the start, but as you notice, they had wide tracks, which the Germans didn't have tracks as wide as this. And the armor on these are angled all the way around from the back, on the sides. It really helped with their armor plating. So this is the first T-34. I don't even think the M4 Sherman was made when this came out yet. I'm pretty sure the first one was made in 1942, or at least produced in 1942. Looking over at the next one, the 1941 model, they made some improvements, gave it a much better gun. I think it still had much of the same engine problems as the first model, but I mean, you could literally look here at the detailed welds, and you can tell that it's very not the same from each model. Each model had different quality armor. It was very brittle, so it was quite able to spald very easily when it got shot, especially on the earlier models. Later models it got a little better, but yeah, you can tell there's the way it's welded. It's not the greatest. Now, obviously you had the shielded version, which tended to fix a lot of those problems. I mean, it's got a lot of added extra armor. I mean, with the spacing it kind of helped, especially against I think heat rounds, but still got its issues. I wish you could see some of the German captured ones in this game, but the German captured T-34 is kind of similar to this. They just bolted on a very thin layer of armor. Now looking at the 57 millimeter version, these never saw combat. I don't think either of the 57 saw combat. Yes, it's a smaller caliber, but these are much higher velocity, and I think these could pin like Panthers and Tigers. Like, that's how much velocity they have. Now obviously they don't have a lot of explosive mass because it's a 57, but yeah. Now, the 1942, this is when the M4 started coming out. This is when they kind of had their foot in the game for, I honestly think this was personally the best model of T-34 in World War II, was the 1942 model. Just had a much better gun, better armor, much better armor, very mobile. I mean, look at the look of this thing. This thing looks so good. All right, the 1942, my personal favorite. Now, the 1943 model, yeah, it was more armored than the 42, but there was its issues with that being more armored. It was a little bit slower and a little less maneuverable. And look at this ridiculous turret hatch. I mean, the Germans had a captured 1943 one that they had extra bolted on armor on the front, and they replaced that with a cupola. It was very weird, but it had this insane thing. I mean, this one's better. The 1942 one is much better, and the 43, it's just better armored, but a little bit slower. And then, of course, you have the flamethrower one, which this is a flamethrower right here. Same as the 43, it's got a flamethrower. Came out at the same time. Now, there was a 1942 57. I think there was even a 43 one. There was a 1943 one, but I have to double check that. Yeah, another 57 millimeter. Again, never saw combat. I think they were going to see combat, but I think they broke down along the way because, you know, they sometimes did have issues with that. So looking at the first T-34-85, as you can see, this is the 1944 one. Actually, I could just take a good look at both of these. So these are obviously the ones that people really talk about the most. And World War II, late war ones are kind of not the greatest. Here's a flamethrower one. As you can see, that's machine gun. That's flamethrower. And yeah, they even have, like, you know, sandbag ones. These, I mean, they look better, but I think the post-World War II T-30-45s were better. And I think this is a, yeah, this is a flamethrower one of those as well. But this is a late war. I think these are late wars. This is 1945. No, these are both 44. Okay, well, scratch that. So yeah, they just have armor. So these are actually meant to stop them from the heat rounds at the time. They'd put on this like little chicken wire armor, which I know there was a German Panzer IV that had this, but we're not talking about the Germans today. We're talking about the Soviets. So obviously these, with that spacing, it actually helped. It doesn't look like it would do much, but it actually did help against heat at the time. Now, obviously, Cold War heat rounds would not have an issue with that, but now we're going to kind of look at these. So these are the tank destroyers, or the SPGs, if you want to call them. My mouse is really acting up. I am sorry. It keeps zooming out. I think this was the first one, was the Su-122. As you can see, it wasn't the greatest of models, but you know, it's still a 122 millimeter howitzer, so it still did its work. Now the Su-85, as you can see, there is a fatal weakness on the front. If you shot, I think right here, it was kind of a bit of an issue. So just one thing to be of note. The Su-85M was just a much better model. And yeah, it had a slightly bigger turret face, but the Su-85M was just much better. Then of course you have the Su-100 big gun, which actually there was supposed to be a prototype T-34 that had a 100, like it had a different turret. I can't remember what turret it had, but they gave it a slightly different turret and they gave it a 100 millimeter gun. War Thunder has one. I'll probably put a picture of that on screen of the T-34-100. But yeah, Su-100 is my personal favorite of the SUs. It's just basically the same armor as the Su-85M, but just with a bigger gun. Obviously, you have the Su-152, the ISU-152, which has a machine gun, and then you have the ISU-122S, which was much better than this. I mean, I think this had better armor at the time. When this one came out, the armor kind of sucked, but you know, the gun was so much more improved, so they kind of replaced with that. Now, the KV-1 1939, there is, as you can notice, this is definitely like the SMK turret, kinda. And there's actually, they don't have it in game, but there was a KV-2 model from 1939 that had a much different turret than what this has. Like, it was kind of angled like this in the front, and instead of it being flat in the back, it kind of came out like this. And it was just a different turret shape, but it did not have the machine gun on it on the 1939 model. But yeah, there was the KV-2. This is the 1940, which they do have just the 1941 in War Thunder, but it's like an event thing. Obviously, the KV-2 ZIS-6, one of my personal favorites. I also have a video on screen of that. Oh, dude, it's so good. All right, but the 1940 KV-1, as you can see, the gun looks different. You get that, you know, classic turret shape now, and the hole is really much more KV-1 hole. But yeah, look at the gun on this L11, and then this F-32 gun. This is just this weird model. Now, obviously, the KV-1E, oh, buddy. KV-1E is my personal favorite. It's got these extra bolted-on armors, as you can see, with the spacing on that. And even on this sides here, if I can get a good look, they had like bolted-on armor on the sides. You can see it. It's off-coloring. So the side tanks, yeah, you can see the side plates are even more protected. So this was heavily armored, but the gun kind of sucked at the time. This was really out in the function. Now the KV-1 1941, that's interesting. Obviously, these had transmission issues as well as the early T-34s. These transmissions would break down quite often. I mean, look, this map is actually the Sani map. So they tended to break down, and hence why the Battle of Raseiniai happened, where it was just a single tank stuck, couldn't move because of transmission issues, and it just held its ground. But the KV-1 1942, this is kind of looking like the KV-1C. I feel like this is the KV-1C kind of, but the German captured KV-1C had a German gun that was so much better. But yeah, this is kind of looking like the KV-1C. I think this is. So yeah, 1942 KV-1. You don't really hear about these ones. You kind of only hear about the 41 and the 40 KV-2, or not KV-2s, KV-1s. But my mouse keeps zooming in. I don't know what the issue is with the mouse wheel, but I'm sorry. Here's the KV-8 Flame. I think they added the flamethrower on this around the time this was being made. So this was because this was clearly modified. So I think it came after. KV-1S, so basically the sport version, if any of you are car guys. KV-1S, it was just much faster, but still, it added this 5 cannon, so it was, better. But the KV-1S is a bit of a meme, because it performed so much better, it ran so much better, but it still had its issues. Then the KV-85 really paved the way for the IS-1. As you can see, this is the IS-1. There is actually another model IS-1, but they only have one in this game. So yeah, the KV-85, 85mm, led to the IS-1, which the IS-1 was in 1943. I think that was like late 1942, or this was early 1943. I know this clearly came out in 1943. IS-1, you can see the hull. It's kind of the same. Now, it was slightly different for the IS-2, 1943, which honestly, the 43 version is not that well protected in terms of armor, because it kind of had the similar armor to the IS-1. I mean, they both came out in the same year, but this was the 85, this was the 122. But they kind of solidified it to stop giving it the 85, and they gave it the 1944 version, which is a little bit better. I'd say a little bit better. It's much better armor. However, the turret was the weakness. You just shot the cheeks at this point. And yeah, and a notable thing is the transmissions were actually, transmissions were positioned differently. The fuel tanks were in the front, and like everything was kind of just weird on the IS-2s. They were different from most tank. Now this one right here is the 1945 version, but there is something called the IS-2M, which did come out, which there is also a KV-2 with like the IS-2M hull, and it's so weird looking, but it's like, man, could you imagine if that existed in World War II? The KV-2M, like, that'd be insane. But yeah, this is the 1945 one. Now that's all the heavy tanks, and now we're gonna kind of go to these. I just wanted to show these off because these are really cool. So obviously there's this little tank here. It's a T-60 hull with the BM-8 Katyusha rockets on the top. Pretty cool. Just a little more protection than I would say this, which has also BM-8 Z6 rockets. But the truck is a little less modeled. Here is a lot better example of one. BM-13 with these, as you can see, the rockets are a lot bigger. BM-13, and they had these like little contraptions that went down on the floor. So you kind of need them. This is the solid Katyusha look. The BM-13 Katyusha. I mean, look at this thing. It's just gorgeous. War Thunder has, I think, this one, but they don't have this. So they actually don't have the solid Katyusha yet. And these folded over the windows. So these little things would fold over the windows. And yeah. Then of course you have the BM-31 Andorusha. I do have this in War Thunder. It's kind of garbage in terms of War Thunder combat, but in this game, oh, it's a freaking beast. Like, I think these are like 300 millimeter rockets. So the Sturm Tiger has a 380 millimeter rocket, just to put that into perspective. But yeah, these are the Soviet tanks of World War II, as I got them mostly laid out. Obviously, there was way more light tanks. I just only have these two. However, I think it is of wortable note that, hold on. But yeah, that's basically ends the video for today. So here's all the Soviet tanks. A little bit of history on, when they came out. Soviet tanks are cool. So like I said, personal favorites would probably have to be the KV-2 1940 T-34 1942 model, which is right here. And I mean, I do like the KV, the T-30-45s, but honestly, I don't know. I really like the 57s too. Especially the 1942 57. This was the best 57 they had. You can really tell the difference of barrel here, but I mean, dude, look at this angle here. Like just like imagine you're just like a soldier and you're just kind of walking through this. I mean, just look at this. All these 34s laid out. It is absolutely splendid. So yeah, this is the history of Russian tanks, Soviet tanks. USSR was very different from Russia, but yeah, this is my little layout here on this pretty big map, but really not that big in the grand scheme of things. And yeah, that's my video, I guess. This is a interesting video.